going to make some little Scotty Dog decorations, which you could put potpourri in or lavender and hang inside a wardrobe, but another nice little gift idea. I don't have a pattern, so we're going to start from scratch. So first of all, you need a piece of card to draw your pattern onto. And I'm going to draw the body of my dog first, which is just a rectangle, and that's going to measure about 6 inches across. So 6 inches at the top. Then I'm going to come down about 4 inches. Keep it nice and square. Doesn't have to be perfect, we are going to alter it slightly in a second. So there's his body. To make him have a little bit more shape, if I measure in from my 6 inches at the top of the rectangle to about 1 inch, and then from his bottom foot to the back go up, and the same at the front, so he's starting to look a little bit more doggy shaped. The next thing to do is to extend his bottom, that's his back side, up and down again to make a triangle for his tail. And for his head I'll need to draw another rectangle, just overlapping slightly, and this one will measure about 3 centimetres by 2. And you can see I'm starting to take the shape of the dog. I'll need to draw 2 rectangles on the bottom for feet, but then what I'm going to do is to shape the feet round so they look a little bit more like feet. I'll need to join his neck from his chin to his body, and then I'm going to put a triangular ear on the top of the head. Then I'm going to round him off a little bit, so I'll use a thicker pen to give him a little bit more shape. I'm going to keep his ear pointed. I'm going to give him a bit of shape across his nose, although Scotty's have got quite square noses, so we'll keep that bit square. Round under his mouth, round his neck, across the chest and down to the feet. A little bit round on his tummy, and to keep his foot round there. Straight across the bottom, whoops, up to the tail, down, round onto the back, and as you come across his back I'm going to curve up and round back onto his ear. So that's the shape of my dog. The outline I'm going to cut out is going to be around about 1 centimetre bigger all the way around, because that's the size and the shape I want. By the time I've got my seam allowance, it's going to have shrunk. So I'm going to cut around about, doesn't have to be perfect, 1 centimetre all the way around. And that'll be my pattern. Then I need to transfer my pattern onto my fabric. So I'll need 2 pieces of fabric. The smaller the print the better, really. Put those face to face. And put them into the corner so I'm not wasting too much fabric. And then I'm going to draw around my pattern on the back of the fabric, just in case you see any of the pen marks on the front. Doesn't matter on the back. And cut out both pieces together. You could actually change the shape of the dog by changing the shape of the nose. I was thinking if you made the nose very long and pointy, you could make an English Bull Terrier. If you left off the ears and then put floppy ears on afterwards, it could be a Spaniel. But I think Scotty Dogs are very fashionable at the moment. So just cut all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a true representation of a Scotty Dog. Then I need to sew together. So I'm just going to put my machine onto a straight stitch, and quite a small one because I'm going to stuff him, and I don't want the stuffing to come through the stitches. And I'm going to leave a gap for turning on his bottom. So I'll just put a few pins to keep those two pieces together as I sew around. And start to sew. And I'm going to sew quite slowly so that I can manoeuvre around the corners. So across the base of the foot. So I'm trying to keep it a uniform around about 1/4 inch from the edge. So it's going to be quite a chunky puppy. Around the bottom of the foot. The chunkier the better actually, because it makes it easier for turning. If you have any very slim areas like legs or ears or tails, they can be quite difficult to turn inside out. So around his nose, that's where I rounded off all the square angles from the rectangles. To the ear, so I'm going to keep that quite sharp because it's got pointy little ears. Into the corner and pivot the needle. I'll speed up a little bit here. So that's the back of his neck. Across the back. Up the tail. And I'm going to stop and pivot into the tail for turning, and then I'm going to leave a gap here of around about 3 or 4 inches just from the bottom of the tail, so that makes it easier for turning. Now before I turn him the right way round, where the points of the ears are, I'm just going to snip across the top so there's less fabric and it makes it more pointy. Be careful not to snip into the stitches. On the areas that are curved, like the inside of the tail and across the back, snip into the fabric at around about 1/4 inch gaps, being careful not to snip into the stitches because you'll have to sew that again. And this helps to stop the fabric from puckering when you turn it. So that'll be any of these areas on the inside of the ear, underneath the chin. Go all the way around if you wanted to. Oops. And then underneath the tummy. Then I'm going to turn it inside out. I'll start with the furthermost point away, which is his ear, and the nose, and then the front leg. I'm just going to push my scissors up inside his ear to try and get the point through. Be careful if your scissors are sharp that you don't want to rip the stitches. Push out his nose. There's the front leg. Then the back leg. And finally is the tail. Again, you need something quite sharp to go up inside there to push the shape out. There. And now I'm going to stuff him. Now I'm not going to put too much stuffing inside because I want to keep him quite two-dimensional, because after all he's only got 2 legs and 1 ear. So I don't want him to try and look like a toy. He is more of a decoration than a toy. Just push that side out a little bit more. You could press at this point if you wanted to press over the top of the seams. And if you do notice that you have any puckering, then turn him back the other way and do that snipping around the edge again. So I'm going to stuff first of all the furthermost away from his bottom area, so stuff inside the ear. And you can make this quite firm so it keeps its shape, but without making it too fat. And the stuffing that I'm using is from hollow fibre pillows. It tends to be a lot cheaper than buying proper toy stuffing. And of course it's washable as well. So I need to make sure his neck's quite firm because that's a vulnerable area for bending. I want it to keep its shape. But it will have a collar on. So if you do have any creasing around the neckline, don't worry too much. It actually takes a lot more stuffing than you would imagine for a small toy or a small decoration as well. So into the feet, across his back. Again, keeping him not too fat. Then I just need a little bit more up inside the tail. Inside there, and that should do. Then I need to sew up the gap down the back. So I'm going to take just a white thread and I'm going to ladder stitch this. So you can see where my machine stitches finish, and I'm just going to pick up the threads there and go over a few times to secure my thread. I find that easier than tying it in a knot. And then join the 2 pieces together and fold over so there's a hem, and it tucks in the frayed edges. That extra stitch can be tucked in as well. That's the end of the machine stitching. And then a ladder stitch goes from one side and across the other side. So in effect the stitch that joins the 2 pieces together goes straight across. Try and keep the stitches as small as you can. The smaller the stitches, the more invisible they're going to be. If you can keep to about the same size as your machine stitch, you shouldn't really notice the difference. So again, just a few stitches, then pull tight just over the opening. If you're not very steady with your hands, or you're not very confident in hand stitching, so I've just got a knot, leave the opening underneath the dog instead of at the back. I find it easier to stuff from the back side, but you're less likely to see the stitches if you're sewing underneath the tummy. So that's the back side stitched up as invisibly as I can. I'm just going to kind of manoeuvre the wadding around a little bit, because again I don't want him to be too 3-dimensional because he's only got 2 legs and 1 ear, so I want him to be quite flat. He'll need a collar, so I'm going to tie a little pink bow around his neck. I keep saying his, it's all in pink, so it should probably be a her. And if you want to pop just a blob of glue behind there to keep the bow in place, when you've decided how it's going to sit, would be an option. Snip the ends of that off. And the final thing to do is to put a ribbon in his back to hang him up. And you may be thinking, well, you could have done that invisibly when you were putting the dog together. And yes, you could, very much like the same way you put straps inside a handbag before you turn it inside out. But the only thing with that is you need to find the balance point to hang the dog up. And you can only really do that after it's stuffed. So I'm just sewing together the ends of 2 pieces of ribbon here. And again, maybe a blob of glue would be a little bit more invisible. So for instance, if I'd have put this in the middle of his back before turning the right way around, it wouldn't be hanging quite squarely. It needs to come a little bit more forward now he's stuffed, because the weight of the stuffing means it's slightly off balance. So I'm just going to try and gauge where that's going to be, and I think that looks about right. So turn the loop over so it's facing the back of the dog, and I'm just going to put a few stitches, as tiny as I can, through the loop and over the seam. Now if your stitches are a bit messy or your ribbon's threading, fraying, sorry, then you can always tie another little bow around the ribbon when you're finished. So just over stitch backwards and forwards. Then I'm going to turn the ribbon over, it's nice and neat on this side, and just reinforce that ribbon again just by sewing a few stitches backwards and forwards over the top. Just tiny stitches so they're practically invisible. And if you use the same colour thread, then you shouldn't be able to see those at all. And just go over and over and over in the same place to finish off. Break off your thread, snip off your extra, and then I've got another puppy which I could even decorate my Christmas tree with.